Here's our topic today, point slope form and standard form. And so we last week were learning about slope intercept form. And so that's one of the main types of forms of a linear equation, but there's also point slope form and standard form. So today's lesson is going to cover 6.2 and 6.3. And we're going to cover all three different ways of writing a linear equation. And we're going to review how we graph linear equations. There's lots of ways to graph a linear equation. In your I can statements here, I can graph a linear equation given 2 points, a point and a slope, or a table of values. All right, so those are definitely 3 ways that you can graph a linear equation. And you know, sometimes depending on which form of an equation you have, one way may be easier than another way, but it's not the only way. It's just there's lots of ways to graph your equation. And so the test that's coming up next week, you're going to be graphing a lot of equations, and we want to make sure we cover all the different ways you can do that. Okay, so we can go into our test confidently. Another I can statement, I can determine which form of a linear equation reveals a given key feature. Okay, and so we'll look at which form shows what things just by looking at it. So these are the 3 forms, and last week was slope-intercept form, which is y equals m times x plus b. And in this equation, m is your slope. Slope tells you how steep a line is. It's also known as rise over run, or the change in y over the change in x, or the rate of change. Has lots of different interpretations. And then b, this number here, is your y-intercept. And the y-intercept is where your graph crosses or intercepts the y-axis. And so from this form right here, just looking at it, we can see what the slope is, and we can see what the y-intercept is if it is in this form. If your equation is in point slope form, it would look like this. Y minus y1 equals m times the quantity of x minus x1. M, just like over here, m, they represent the slope. That's the slope. That's how steep the line is. It could be positive. It could be negative. It can be 0. It can be undefined. All linear equations, there's 4 types of slope. And the point x1, y1. So they're giving you some random point. But if you know a point and you know the slope, you can graph the line. You can write the equation if you can graph the line. If you can write the equation, you could graph the line. If you can graph the line, you could write the equation. So it goes both ways. And so the way that you would figure out what point is on the line from point slope form is what's being subtracted here is the y coordinate, and what's being subtracted here is the x coordinate. The last form is called standard form. A times x plus b times y equals c. In this form, this is a linear equation where a, b, and c are all constants. Constants are just numbers. And so there's not really any of these colorful variables standing out because it's not giving us any specific information just looking at standard form. Okay, point slope, we can see the slope, and we can see one of the points on the line. Slope intercept form, we can see the slope, and we can see a point, which is specifically the y-intercept. Okay, this is the value with the x coordinate of 0, b, and it's on the y-axis. Even though standard form doesn't give you anything right away, standard form is useful for when you want to find the x and y intercepts quickly. Okay, it's easy to substitute 0 in for x and then substitute 0 in for y. So that way when you solve for the other variable, you can do that quickly because the entire term would drop out when you multiply the number by 0. All right, so quick check for understanding here. I'm going to give you a minute to answer this multiple choice question. I'll find a timer. Okay. Okay, so I'm going to give you 1 minute to answer the multiple choice question in Pear Deck. Which form can you read the y-intercept from the equation? Going to pick one. I have half of you that have responded so far. Thank you. The other half of you need to respond. All right. So time's up. Let's see. I got 17 of 19 responses. Not bad, guys. Okay, so let's see how we came up with our answers here. So most of you think it's A, slope-intercept form. And then a few of you think it's C, standard form. Which form can you read the y-intercept from the equation? The y-intercept is represented by a lowercase b, right? And the only one that has that variable is right here. This is slope-intercept form. There's an uppercase b in standard form, but this is different. This is not the same as lowercase b. And so in math, the case of your variable is very important, right? And so the only correct answer here is slope-intercept form. A is the correct answer. Let's try another one of these quick multiple choice questions. Right, here's the next one. Now you're answering which form doesn't show the slope in the equation. Which form doesn't show the slope in the equation? You're given 1 minute again. So go to your Pear Deck tab, and you're going to make a decision. I have half of you that have responded. The other half of you need to choose. Go to your Pear Deck tab and make a decision. Which form does not show the slope in the equation? Okay, hold on 1 sec. So let's come back to our Pear Deck right here. And so which form doesn't show the slope? 18 of 22 of you responded. We have answers all over the place, but mostly we said standard form. And so lowercase m represents slope. Slope shows up in slope-intercept form. Slope shows up in point slope form, but it does not show up in standard form. So the correct answer here, which form doesn't show the slope, is standard form. Okay, standard form is like basic, and then slope-intercept has the slope and an intercept. Point slope has a point and a slope. All right, so the names are not real creative. They just basically say what's in there. All right, so standard form. Okay, so now we are on point slope form, and I'm going to do one of these with you. So I'm just going to go to the week at a glance real quick. under classwork. I don't have it open yet. And I'm going to join Pear Deck as a student. All right, so here's the question that you guys are on right now as well. So point slope form says write each in point slope form. So we have two different problems. I'm going to do the first one with you. We have a line with a slope of 2 and it passes through the point 3, 5. Okay, so point slope form. I am just going to type a text box right here. So basically, when you're doing point slope form, you're going to type the y minus, and I'm going to put something here. I'm just kind of filling it out before I fill it in. Equals my slope, which is my m, times x minus a value here. So I kind of left it like this on purpose, just to kind of show you the basic setup. I can't type y sub 1 or x sub 1, so I just left them as blanks in parentheses. And so I'm going to fill in the pieces that I have. The slope of 2 means that I'm going to take this m out and replace it with 2. If my point is 3, 5, that means my x is 3 and my y is 5. So 3 goes here, and then 5 goes here. All right. And now I don't really need all these extra parentheses. They're not wrong to leave them there, but just to kind of show you that I did substitute those things in. So when you come over and you're going to try 2 now, so it's going to be in the form y minus something. Oops. Equals slope times the quantity of x minus, well, something. And so you have to figure out what's going to go in each set of parentheses and what do you replace the m with. Okay, so you're going to try number 2 right now, and I'm going to give you, let's say, about 3 minutes to do this one. So I'm just going to leave my example up here so you can reference it, but go ahead and go back to your Pear Deck, and you're going to fill in this. And so I'll give you until 2:11, and then we'll kind of look at some of your answers. Go ahead and try this in your Pear Deck if you're not already. I already have 11 of you working on it. And so I'm going to try to give you some feedback right now while you're doing that. It's like another minute and try this one. Right, I'm just kind of going through some that were tried. Then we'll go over it. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and come back to our Google Meet. And so I'm just kind of sharing with you some of your responses. And so here's someone who wrote out y minus, and then they substituted in 7. Good. Equals, instead of m, they put -3. Great. And then x minus our x value, which is -1. This is perfect. Okay, so if you got this far, this is 100% accurate. It's just not 100% simplified, because there is something that I can do when you have subtraction of a negative. Okay, so if you are subtracting a negative, don't forget that can be changed into adding the opposite. So this right here is going to become x plus 1, x plus +1. And so if I come over here, I can show you. I'll type that out. So we have y minus 7 equals -3 times x plus 1. Okay, so I even dropped the parentheses around this 7. It wasn't really doing anything. I had it there just for the substitution step. And then this is what you should have. I can highlight that just like I did the other one. Okay, so that's how we can take a point and a slope and write it in point slope form. Now we're going to take this same equation that we just wrote here with this information of slope of -3 and a point of -1,7, and we are going to graph it. Okay, when you are asked to graph an equation of a line, there's lots of things you can do. In point slope form, if you have a point and a slope, what you're going to do is plot that point first and then use the slope to make more points that you can draw a line through. All right, so that's going to be our steps right here on this slide. You are going to step, well, you can't really see that. It's a different color. Step, that's not working either. Step 1. Why is this thing so silly? There we go. Step 1. Oh my goodness. Plot the point that is given. Step 2. Use the slope to plot more points. Step 3. Draw the line. Okay, and so I'm going to give you some time right now to work on just this slide. Okay, let me give you guys 5 minutes. I'm going to give you to 2:20 to work on this slide specifically. All right, and you're going to use those steps. So plot the point that's given, then you're going to use the slope to plot more points, and then you're going to draw the line. So go ahead and go back to your Pear Deck tab, and I want you to work on that one until 220. And I didn't show you what I was typing, and I apologize. So at this point, if you come back and look at the meet screen, you'll see there's some steps there. Okay, and those are the 3 steps you're going to do to graph the line on this slide. Slide 6. Okay, so as you guys are working on this, I'm noticing that some of you are not plotting our initial point in the right location. Our initial point is -1, 7. All right, and so I'm going to show you exactly where -1, 7 is. Remember that when you have a point, the first number is your x value, and the second number is your y value, which means when I want to plot this, I need to first go to -1 on the x axis, and then I'm going to go to +7 on the y-axis. So my first point needs to be right here. So check in the Google Meet that you have your first point in the correct location, because some of you do not. All right? You have to make sure you plot the first point in the correct spot. Okay, so we've seen a couple of you are moving them to where they should be, which is great. And now the next step we're going to do is I'm going to use the slope to plot some more points. And what is my slope? Okay, so if I'm going to use my slope, which is given to me that it is -3, and I want to use it to plot more points, you know, I want to think of it as a fraction. I want to think of it as rise over run. And so anytime you're given a slope that's not a fraction, you turn it into one by just putting a 1 in the denominator. So from my starting location of my initial point of the line, I'm going to use the slope of -3 over 1 to plot more points. So rise over run. So going from the green dot, if I rise up 1, 2, 3 units, and then run 1 so that it's going to go downhill, there's a point that can make my line. Or it could go the other way. It could go down 3 units into the right one. And I could keep repeating this until I'm out of grid paper. So using point slope form, I was able to plot the point that was given, and then I used the slope to plot more points. I'm going to give you a chance to kind of adjust your work to match that. So take a minute, go back to your pear deck and change it so that your points are matching my points. And then the last thing I'd want to do is draw a line connecting these points. Okay. And so when you're drawing a line and using these tools, you can make and change how thick or thin your dot or line is. I'm going to use the thinnest option that I can for this line. And I'm going to line it up through my points. And anytime you draw a line, remember guys, it goes on forever. So I actually want to make the ends of my line have arrows to show that does go on forever in both directions. Okay. So you will have a chance to come back to this slide and work some more on it, okay? But for right now, we're going to move forward. Okay, so I'm going to hide your responses. I'm going to go back to sharing just the general teacher version. And so we're going to look at slide 7, which is a video. I don't want you to watch that right now. We don't have time for that, but you can go back and watch it later. Slide 8. Okay, so these last couple slides we're going to work on are all about standard form now. We just looked at point slope form, and now we're looking at standard form. And if you remember, I told you standard form doesn't really give you any information just looking at it, but it is set up so that it's easy to find the x and y intercept. So if you're asked to graph a line and it is given to you in standard form, one of the easiest ways to do that is to find the x-intercept and the y-intercept, which we have learned about before a couple weeks ago, and plot those and then draw a line connecting them. And that's exactly what's done in this example here. So the standard form equation that's given is 2x plus 4y equals 8. And by letting y equal 0 and substituting out a 0 in place of that, we can solve for x and find out it's 4. And you can actually do this in your head pretty easily, but it is written out so it is explained to you. All right, 4 times 0 is 0, so 2x equals 8, so x equals 4. And then reverse it, change the x being set equal to 0. 2 times 0 is 0, so 4y equals 8, and then y equals 2. So we know that the x-intercept is 4 and the y-intercept is 2. So on your coordinate plane, the x-intercept goes on the x-axis, The y-intercept goes on the y-axis. And if you have 2 points, you can graph a line. That's all you need. You can have more than 2 points to be more accurate, but if you have 2 points, that creates a straight line. You just draw a line through them. So this is how you can graph a line with 2 points from standard form. This is the easiest 2 points to get, is where you first let y equal 0 and then let x equal 0. All right, so last slide I'm going to give you some time to do before we go over it. I'm going to give you 5 minutes to do this one. We're going to graph 6x plus 3y equals 30 in standard form. And then these are your steps. Find the x-intercept. Find the y-intercept. Plot those 2 points that are your intercepts and then draw a line through them. I'm going to put you on the student pace so that way you can go back to the example slide if you would like to. And then you're going to have until 30, and we'll go over it. So 2:30. Come back to the Google Meet and let's share this tab instead. So let me show you some of what responses that you guys came up with. And so I didn't see one that was like exactly perfect. This one came super close. That one's really, really close. Some of you guys, this one's pretty close, pretty close. So let me show you how to do this one. First, find the x-intercept. So remember, when y equals 0, what does x equal? So if I replace the y with, say I replace this with the 0, okay, then that whole term disappears because 3 times 0 is 0. So I'm just left with 6x equals 30. And if I divide both sides by 6, well, then I know x has to be 5. So my x-intercept is 5. It goes on the x-axis at 5. Now I'm going to go through and I'm going to find the y-intercept. The y-intercept. So to do that, we make x 0. All right, 6 times 0 is 0. So what I'm left with is, I'm just kind of writing over my own writing here, 3y equals 30. And you should be able to do this in your head. 3 times y equals 30. Well, that means y has to be 10. So that's my y-intercept. Y is 10. I'm going to come up here and put my second point. And that is step 3. Okay, step 3 was to plot the 2 points. We did that. We found the y-intercept. We found the x-intercept. We plotted both points. Okay, and then the last thing is to draw our line. All right, so then you're going to need a line tool, and you have to just connect the dots, basically. Okay, you should always put arrows at the ends of your lines to show that your line goes on forever. Right? So then that is the last step, step 4. All right. So this is how, if you're given standard form, how you can quickly graph the equation of that line. But remember, guys, even though we're talking about all these different forms, and let me go back to the slide where it has them listed right here. So there's slope-intercept form, which we had a whole lesson on how you do that. You plot the y-intercept and then you use the slope to plot more points. There's point-slope form. You can plot the point they give you and use the slope from that point to plot more points. standard form. You can find the x and y intercepts quickly, plot those, and connect the line that puts them together. But there's another way to graph an equation of any line. If you don't remember all these different ways and you're just struggling, don't forget, you can always just make a table of values. An xy table, pick some values for x, substitute them into the equation, and find out what y would be. That's another thing you could do. It's not going to be the easiest way, but in math, there's lots of ways to do things, and it's just learning which way is easiest for the type of equation you have. So we've gone over each of these types of equations and the different quickest way to graph them, okay? But you can always use different methods depending on what you're remembering when you're taking the test or when you're actually faced with having to do this. So that concludes your lesson for today. I'm going to leave it in student paced mode so you can go back and watch those videos, take some notes. Make sure you have your notes done by the time we take our test next week, Thursday, Friday. I want you to be able to use them on the test. If you have any missing assignments, this Friday, on the 6th is the last day you could turn them in. And I asked you that yesterday.